So my name is TiffaniBova. I am the Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Great Reset, how businesses are building resilience for their companies today and for the future. But as always, I like to start with setting the scene, making sure everybody's on the same page on kind of what we're all dealing with. Not that we don't know it very well, but I like to set the context that we have to become much more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Unfortunately, that's not going to end anytime soon. But it's what we do during this time that will really set us up for the things that will make us successful in 2021 and beyond. When we first entered this year, I don't think any of us would have even imagined that such a massive black swan event would hit not only our social environment, our business environment, our healthcare, our schools. Everything around the globe has been touched. Depending on where you are in the country, in the US, or where you are in the world listening to this, you may be still on lockdown. You may be on restricted access to go serve your customers or even get out and sell again. But the good news is that lots of really great things are happening. Businesses have been reimagining what it means to be in business and how to sell and serve customers, the importance of technology and all the things that go around that. So I like to call it the new future or the next future. I don't like new normal because I feel like we left a time that was unequal for so many. One stat I always use when I make that statement is there are still some 19 million people in the United States who do not have access to high-speed internet, which means as we work more virtually and we educate more virtually and we collaborate and communicate and socialize more virtually, they're fully isolated from that. And so we have to find ways to bring the opportunity to those that don't have access to the things that we take for granted on a daily basis. That's why I lean into that term next future. How can we build it back better and stronger? And really many of you on this line and listening to this presentation are the ones that fuel that kind of transformation for businesses. So we recently went out and did some unusual and really insightful research where we surveyed small and mid-business customers in March and then again in August, and seeing the difference between the two. And so what's been fascinating is that SMB leaders are still really optimistic. These are the end users. Maybe even some of you answered this survey that we did, but it's across verticals, across segments. We're looking at SMB as sort of 2 to 20 being S and 21 to 200 being mid. I know there's all kinds of slices out there that cap a SMB under 1,000 or above 500, but that's where we really capped it, was we wanted to capture what was happening in that sub 200 range. The good news is that they have ways in which they're facing these challenges during this pandemic of acquiring new customers. They're planning more for the long term. Or importantly, they're retaining their existing customers, which I think is highly important. I actually believe 2020 is the year of the customer and not necessarily the prospect. Going deep and wide into your existing base. I think that's a great way to stimulate growth without having to take the risk of approaching people who maybe don't even know who you are today. The next thing we found is that what is the pace of adoption of technology? It's accelerated. There's no question. COVID has cracked open the fact that so many businesses had put off the investments that were needed around digital transformation as well as technology for a long time. And now they no longer can do that. The SMBs that found themselves in a much better position were those that had already started making investments. I often use restaurant as an easy and quick example here. For the restaurants that didn't have their menu already online and were doing 99% of their business or 90% of their business in their four walls, and they didn't have a strong delivery network, they weren't connected to Uber Eats or Grubhub, if they didn't know who their customers were to be able to communicate to them to say, hey, we're still open for delivery or curbside pickup, they were really caught off guard. For those that had already started to make those transitions, they were in a much better position to weather this storm, no matter how long it lasts, and finding creative ways to continue to engage with their customers. But from this, you should also see that many are still growing. Customers are still buying, businesses are still selling. Depending on what industry you're in, the difference there in those growth rates could be significant. If your primary vertical was hospitality, that's a tough place right now. If it's brick and mortar retail, also fairly tough. But in other industries, it's accelerating in growth. So if you know which industries are growing and you have a base of customers that are in those, that's where I suggest you focus. The last is Are people still buying? Well, the good news is that 91% of VPs of sales leaders are confident in their company's ability to close deals. Initially, when things went into lockdown in the March-April timeframe, I reached out and asked sales leaders what's top of mind. And one of them was, how do I transition all these outside field sellers to inside sellers? And really, it has everything to do with your ability to stay agile, using tools like video, using creative ways to engage with customers, with just value and insights, not always selling, like helping them understand how they can stabilize their business, get their people back to work safely. The number one thing SMBs are concerned with right now is health and safety of their people and keeping track of all the regulations that are changing on a daily basis of how they can, in fact, reopen. So being able to collaborate and communicate internally in their own businesses is really, really important. And so that's an opportunity for you to lead the way for your clients to figure out, how do we get back to the office potentially, but more importantly, back to growth. Now, that is what's going on from a set the scene. Overall, though, this is all about these big changes in our customers. If you are selling to B2C and you may be selling to consumers, or B2B2C and they're selling to consumers, this is important to understand that the consumer behaviors and customer behaviors have changed forever. In some categories, they may never come back. But I absolutely believe that it will be somewhere in the middle. It's not going to totally be the way that it was, and hopefully it will not stay the way it is right now. So I use grocery as an example. Some of us might have gone to the grocery store once or twice a week. Now we might go once a month and doing everything online and having it delivered at home. Many believe that some of us will not go back at all to going back to the grocery store, except for essentials maybe once or twice a month, and completely change that habit, or changing the habit on how you get your medications that are now being delivered, or how you have meetings with customers, how you facilitate having a service call where they're actually asking you to potentially do a Zoom call so that they can do a virtual visit of what work you want to do in your business or in your home. Those kinds of behaviors will absolutely impact the way in which you sell, market, and service to your customers. Now, if it goes somewhere in between, I'll tell you that it isn't that you can't stop innovating on the technologies and products and services that you are bringing to market. What's interesting here is 67% of customers expect new products and services more frequently than before. All this experience that we're having as consumers, working from home, educating from home, doing healthcare from home, whatever it might be, at the end of the day, it means that those experiences are now going to follow us. As I said the last time I was with you, customer experience is even more so important now. But what happens when someone has an experience in a completely different industry, at a completely different company, could even be in their personal life, when they then have an experience with you in the B2B world, they expect that same level of experience that they've had, especially if it's significantly better. An app, a collaboration platform, a community, a knowledge base, chat bots, whatever it is to deliver them that kind of innovation at the customer layer. Now, when you don't make those innovation investments and you're not pushing your own digital transformation as a brand, what it says to your customers is you have apathy towards them, that you don't care enough about them to make those investments in innovation and in digital technologies. Going back to that original sketch of, COVID sort of breaking into the way that it was and this new future being much more digital and connected, you have to live it as well. And you are a leader to them. You're sort of the beacon of light to say, if we're doing it, we know you can do it. We'll tell you how we did it so we can help you. And so those kinds of investments are really, really important, and even more so now. One of them is AI. We've been talking about AI now, even in my previous role as a research fellow at Gartner, for almost a decade, and how it's really going to transform the way we sell, market, service, design products, how we remain agile. The stat out of here I want you to pay attention to is 72% of high-performing companies can analyze performance in real time versus 49% of underperformers. Now, that's a two-sided coin. One is, are you analyzing your own business? Are you noticing patterns in your data? Are you changing what products and services you're rolling out based on the new demands and new expectations of customers? That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, are you enabling and empowering your customers to do that? Because the end user who is buying from either you or from your customer wants a personalized experience. They want improved customer segmentation. Know me, treat me like you know me, treat me like you know other people like me, so that you can give me the insights and data I need, or the technologies and tools that I need to be successful, and really driving the next best action. What should they be doing? Once again, two sides to the coin. What should your people be doing, because you're capturing all this AI and data and insights? But also, how do you help your customers do that as well? And really driving towards these automated customer interactions, because so much is coming at everybody. They want to be able to have a speed of response, if you will, to those customers. So ultimately, it's your role to not only do it internally, as I've said a few times, but leading your customers to why it's important, because these high-performing companies absolutely are making these investments. Now, one of you have just asked, how do I prepare myself? How do I actually have sort of a growth mindset and think differently about growing my business going forward? Well, this section is for you. It's how do you build a high growth company? I would tell you that it's really evolving. Historically, it was big beat small, right? The big guys are going to beat the small guys. And how do we compete? And I'm at such a disadvantage. There's so many things I'm not able to do because I don't have the capital or the people or the capabilities. I don't have the talent. And yet we've now learned that fast will beat slow. And SMB companies, if you are an SMB yourself, you have much more agility and ability to be far more responsive than the big guys. It's a big ship to turn when they have to reorganize or launch a new product or reorganize their selling efforts or change their brand and marketing platforms, invest in more social or test things. And in your case, you have the ability to really spin those things up quickly, fail quickly, learn quickly, adjust, and keep going. And the next of this is this relevant and agile, right? Building resilience into your business means that you have to know what's happening. You have to anticipate almost what's going to be next for your customers. And so this is a great way to think about it. It's ecosystems, it's looking at industries, it's looking at becoming relevant. All of those things are really, really important. But if you look at the historic and the current and the next, maybe you can even start to frame out your own growth mindset and layer things underneath this and put teams of people together who can focus on each of these categories. But really, when you look at the commonality amongst the high growth companies, it all lands on this one slide. It has to be values driven. What's the purpose of your company? Why are you doing what you're doing? What are the values of the things that you do in your communities? How are you impacting your employees and the communities you serve? Really important today, especially in light of everything that's going on from a social justice perspective. But ultimately, this is about looking at data and algorithms, taking that information, looking at the insights, making different decisions potentially than you would make otherwise in order to drive these compelling and meaningful customer experiences. Because it still is a differentiator and will continue to be. But now it is much more digitally driven experiences than face-to-face experiences. And that results in these deep customer understandings, much deeper insights about the customers you're serving and potentially the customers that your customers are serving. You're able to make these better decisions, and I can't stress this enough. What got us here is not going to get us there. I really hate when I hear from companies that say, it's not the way we do it here. We tried it, it failed many years ago. Having a growth mindset means that you have to have a beginner's mind. Give yourself a little space in your day-to-day to think about what if I knew everything I know now, and I could go back to January of 2020, what would I do differently? What would I invest in? What would I set up? What would I anticipate? How could I be smarter and better and more agile going forward? And so you have the ability now to say all these lessons, how will they prepare me for 2021 and beyond? And I'll land on the fact that it is these commonalities. This is what is really driving, both small, in medium, as well as in enterprise. Now, in the technology space specifically, going back to that SMB survey, we asked what are the 3 ways to drive growth over the next 12 months? And this was for companies who consider themselves technology companies. One was expanding into new geographies. So maybe you're serving, one city or town in your state and you want to go and broaden that way. Maybe you want to go into another state or another region. You might only be in the West Coast. You want to go to the East Coast. You want to go, to the Midwest or the Southwest, whatever it might be. You might even be so bold to say, I want to go into another country, and understanding what does that mean at this time. If you're in a high growth category, why not give it a try? Remember, it's all about trying, failing, learning, and going forward. And then expanding into key accounts. Once again, I can't stress this enough. Don't forget about the goals you already have. The customer base you have, you spent a lot of time, energy, money, resources on capturing them as a new client, serving them thus far. And so you can't just ignore them. And for those of you that are in recurring revenue businesses, churn will kill you at this time. So you have to make sure that you are using all at your disposal to go on the offense, making sure you give your customers a reason not to leave before they leave, and then you try to win them back. And then the third is expanding routes to market. Should you be partnering with other partners to deliver different experiences and different products and services that you have today? That's another one of the questions is, what does this mean for channel companies potentially working together? And this is really that opportunity. We've talked about partner-to-partner collaboration for a really long time. I think now it's probably been 15 years, if not a little bit more. And I've seen so many amazing partnerships come together to really solve big problems for joint customer sets, or just creating an opportunity where they're solving a problem that maybe they did nothing in the past. We've seen so many step up with developing ventilators or PPE equipment, or trying to stand up very quickly ways and platforms for kids to get educated, whatever it might be. Ultimately, it's looking for those opportunities for you to solve those problems, and maybe partner to partner is the way for you to do that. Now, I wanted to give a slice. I'm not going to go through this one at a time, but because I'm really a firm believer in all companies going after, particular industries and focus with the right message, I wanted you to see what are the 3 ways that each of these industries are driving for growth, so that you can think about how do you help your customer. For example, if they're in manufacturing, they're trying to expand in new geographies. Well, does it mean that they need an office in there? Do they need manufacturing? Do they need supply chain capabilities in those other geos? Looking at this and saying, what does it mean for me to help my customer in that particular industry to grow their business? And going back, many of us have grown up in the technology space thinking that the technology will sell itself. It's really cool. It's exciting. Many of you grew up being technologists. At the end of the day, it isn't about being product-led. It's about being customer-led. And the way to do that is to know what your customers are looking for. What are their pain points? What is the opportunity? What are the things you can be doing going forward? In the future, customer-driven organizations will completely reset value and meaningful engagements with customers. This is about trying to reimagine the art of the possible. What are the things you could be doing now that maybe you wanted to do in the past? I know this is a terrible time we're living through, both on a business front and a personal front, but ultimately taking the time to pause and reset and reflect and figure out, how do I build a more resilient business, not only for myself, but for my employees, for the communities that I serve, and also for your customers. Like, it's important that everything remains as close to, positive as we can make it. If you could, once again, go back and remap, if you knew everything you knew today, and you start back in January and you said, boy, if I'd only made these investments, how could you map out your way to get there? Even though you know it may be hard. But ultimately, we have to get out of the status quo. We have to get out of internal inertia. We have to let our people know that even though everybody's uncomfortable and change is really hard, that if we're all going in the same direction, we have a much better shot at being successful. But with that, I'm going to flip over to more of the questions that I've gotten during my presentation. So I'm going to go to a question from Mike. He says, what can channel partners do to recover from a growth stall, generate profitable revenues, and scale their success? So thank you, Mike, for the question. When I wrote the book, one of the opening sentences was how to recover from a growth stall, when in fact it hasn't been a black swan event. So I went to my publisher when this happened and said, hey, can we remove that one sentence? But the bottom line on this is that recovering from a growth stall is very different than if we're in a global growth stall, right? The GDP is down. What we think is going to be happening from a global growth rate perspective is getting more and more compressed. It's challenging top to bottom, regardless of size or industry or segment. But what I will tell you is that's where we need to refocus and double down on our people, making sure our employees are safe, they have everything they need and the tools they need to continue to do their job and service your customers. But more importantly, go into your base. So the example I like to use is, look, when people were coming to the West to look for gold, they didn't find a hill full of gold and then say, that's great, let's go find another hill. No, they mined that hill for gold until they knew they were almost at the bottom, and then they went to go look for another hill. It's far less expensive for you to sell to your existing base. They're much more willing to try new products and services. They're much more loyal. They're going to rave about you to other companies like them. It's a great source for you to find new leads. At the end of the day, looking into your basic customers, especially for you managed service providers who have a recurring revenue stream, you don't want that revenue stream going away. So this is not about reaching out and calling and asking, buy, buy, buy. It's more about asking what's going on. How can we help you stabilize your business? How can we help you get back to work, as I said a few minutes ago? And then how do we really empower and enable you to grow your business during this time? It's about going out, asking those right questions, and listening for the answers. I'll just give you an example from us at Salesforce. It's sort of the April-May timeframe. Mark Benioff, our CEO, said, I want to challenge the company of 55,000 employees to go have 1 million conversations. Conversations, not sales calls, not product demos, conversations. We built an entire program around it and then let everybody loose. We blew the number away. We ended up hitting 1.5 million connections, if you will. And he said, well, that must have been too easy. So we made it 5 million now. But it's really about making sure you're staying close to your customers. And that also goes back to one of the previous questions we got about a beginner's mind, that we don't know all the answers right now, and we don't know what our customers are feeling and what they're doing. So having that kind of open dialogue and transparency is really important to make sure that they know that if they have a problem, that they're going to reach out to you. That's how you reposition yourself from being just a technology provider or the guy who does this or the girl who does that, and being much more about they're my strategic partner in growing this business, getting my people back to work and back to the office, and helping me stabilize and find ways to become more efficient so I can drive greater profitability. So great question, Mike. Thank you. I've got one more here from Mindy. Thank you, Mindy. So what is the market, what is happening, knowing what is happening in the market today, how do we attract and do things in, let's see, a certain order to make sure that they're successful? Like, you know, how do I make the decisions of what I should do now versus what I should do in the medium term versus long term? Fantastic question. Not all things are going to have equal amount of impact to your business. So I've been saying over the last 6 months to really kind of create teams. Now, if you're a really small organization, it might be 2 people. But if you have a little bit of size to you, maybe 3 or 4 from different parts of the organization, and have them responsible for making decisions in key areas of your business. Not just your leadership team, not just your managers, have frontline performers, individual contributors, and managers and leaders. Break up the teams into different parts of the company and then pose questions. I interviewed someone from Simon Sinek's team on my What's Next podcast. And when all this happened, Simon actually challenged his team. Everybody in his company had to come up with 15 ideas of what they could do during this time. Everybody had to come up with 15. And then everybody had to share the 15. And even if someone else had said it, it's, these were my 15 and here's why. And from that exercise, he actually launched 3 products, which is all they're focused on right now because he's not keynote speaking. He doesn't have another book coming out. And so how do you create trainings and how do you create environments and ecosystems and collaborative platforms for people to share ideas, everything around his why and how to keep people together. And so that's a great example of ask everybody in your company, come up with 5 or 10 or 15 ideas. What are the things they think we should be doing? They think you should be doing during this time, and then put them all up on the wall, you know, virtually, and have a conversation, vote on them, and then empower the people that have come up with the idea to drive the project. like I said, it might be an individual contributor. Another great idea that came out of Zappos, the company that sells shoes, is that one of the call center agents said, you know what? This woman called yesterday and she just wanted to talk to someone. She's home, she's isolated, she's home alone. And I think we should create a phone number if people just want to call and talk and want maybe us to help them figure something out. Sure enough, they set up that phone number, put it on their website. They got hundreds of calls. And it was a nice, kind gesture. It didn't impact what they were doing, but it was a way to say, hey, listen, we know everybody's out there struggling to get this together. So I'd like to wrap this up with saying you can continue to follow this research. This was from the State of Sales or the Small Business Trends Report that we've done. We also did a State of Marketing in August. We've got something called Connected Customer coming out in October to talk about what are the customers looking for. All this research is free for you to download. And you can also keep listening to some of my thoughts on the What's Next podcast with TiffaniBova, which is on all of the streaming platforms. What's great about that is it's kind of kept me sane during this time of being stuck at home and not traveling, because ultimately these conversations I get to have is a window into my learning process. And some of my guests have just been so inspiring and amazing on how they're helping companies transform and enable and really thinking and keeping employees front and center. I just did a really great interview with Mark Victor Hansen, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he talked about being a master asker. And I think right now that's such a great topic for us, because I think if we can ask the right questions, our customers will give us the answers and signal to us on what we need to invest in the future. And then, of course, my book, Growth IQ. Thank you so much to Intelisys and all of you for supporting it over the last 2 years. It's now become a Wall Street Journal bestseller as well. It's been translated into 9 languages. So I feel like it's getting to travel around the world, even though I am not. So that's just been really, really special for me to see. So I think that's all the time that I have, but thank you so much for the questions. Thank you, Intelisys, for having me. Once again, my name is TiffaniBova. I'm the Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. Thank you for joining us.